Rolex remains one of the most luxury watch brands in the world. Historically, many of its models have performed very well in terms of value retention and even appreciation. It's always been cool to own a Rolex. It's prestigious, you're suddenly part of the club. But if we dig a little deeper, have the dynamics shifted in recent years? Is Rolex still the epitome of watchmaking in 2025? And should you buy one? Hi, I'm Ricardo, and if you're new to my videos, I talk all about watches, so grab a coffee and relax as we move into a topic that is a lot more complicated than you might expect. Rolex has for decades been synonymous with longevity, craftsmanship, and luxury. Ever since its founding in 1905, Rolex has gone through various waves of popularity. Between 1950 and 1980, for example, it experienced what many call the golden era of the brand. There were iconic model introductions, the Submariner, Explorer, and GMT Master to name a few. These watches became highly popular among professionals, the military, and adventurers. The popularity of Rolex watches during this golden period was helped by celebrities and famous figures wearing these watches on their wrists for all to see. These watches became symbols, cementing their status in history. Then there was the price. In 1980, a Rolex Submariner would cost only around $1,000. So at this time, buying your own Rolex was more of a no-brainer. But now we're in 2025. Does it still make sense? Well, to answer that question, we must consider things like its performance as an investment, its emotional hold on people, its standing as a brand, and its position amid the rise of newer watchmakers. Okay, so we all knew this was coming. Investment. When viewed through the lens of investment, Rolex continues to stand in rare company. As many of us know, between 2020 and 2022, Rolex experienced a period of speculative frenzy unlike anything seen in its modern history. The pandemic-era boom with its restrictions on travel and increased disposable income among higher earners turned the brand's steel models into a modern-day gold rush. Waiting lists at authorized dealers grew impossibly long, and the secondary market became a playground for flippers and investors alike. Prices soared as buyers paid enormous premiums, sometimes double retail, as everyone scrambled to get hold of one of these watches. Rolex was being treated like a commodity rather than the craft it was supposed to be. But as the economic climate shifted in 2023 and 2024, interest rates rose and consumer caution returned. The once roaring resale market cooled and prices for many hyped models fell by 10 or 20% from their peaks. In this environment, buying a Rolex for investment in 2025 is still viable, but only under specific conditions. The first is time. One must be prepared to hold for several years, maybe even decades, to make meaningful gains. The second is model selection. Buying the right reference is still hugely important. Stainless steel sports watches with strong heritage remain the most resilient assets in the Rolex portfolio. The Submariner, for instance, continues to command steady demand because of its combination of luxury and being a tool watch. The Daytona, with its racing lineage and celebrity associations, remains aspirational and scarce. But other models, for example the two-tone Datejusts, the precious metal Cellinis, do not inspire the same want. So you can argue that buying any Rolex in the hopes of appreciation is not a sound strategy. Okay, so moving on, buying for enjoyment is the main reason we all do this hobby. Whether you're chasing a grail watch or prefer collecting micro brands, we do it because it makes us happy. The desire for personal enjoyment remains as potent as ever, and perhaps more authentic in 2025 than it has been in decades. We have the internet, social media is booming, and in 2025 it's easier than ever to exchange information about watches with each other. When it comes to Rolex, I think the brand has always thrived on its emotional connection. The Submariner is not just a diver's tool, it is a symbol of adventure and status. The Explorer is all about exploration and endurance. The Datejust commemorates milestones and achievement. Rolex ownership is, and probably always will, make the wearer very happy. I just can't see this changing anytime soon. And the opportunity to buy and actually wear these watches, rather than hide them in safes, has improved as secondary market prices stabilize. And then you've got the build quality. The strong assurance of a Rolex bracelet, the near bulletproof reliability of its automatic movements, and the quiet confidence it conveys continue to justify its appeal. Unlike ultra-fragile, expensive pieces, Rolexes can be worn daily without fear. Unless you live in London. It is a watch that invites use, not confinement. In that sense, the personal value proposition of a Rolex remains extraordinarily strong. Even if the physical value were to remain flat, the owner still owns a kind of dividend, not in cash, but in experience. And this is what has kept Rolex relevant to this day. Buying one to mark a promotion, an anniversary, or simply a personal goal is still as meaningful in 2025 as it was 50 years ago. Is the Rolex brand still liked? Now, this is a tricky one. I think overall, yes, though the reasons for that have evolved. At least within the watch community, there seems to be some shifts in sentiment. I'm talking about prices. Rolexes were always seen as expensive luxury items, but only more recently have they entered the category of completely inaccessible for most. Let's look at the Submariner, for example. In 1950, you could pick one up for a cool $150. Taking inflation into account, that's around $2,000. In 1980, it was priced at $1,325, which is around $5,300 in today's money. Today, in 2025, a steel sub with a date window will cost you $10,650. So, a lot of people are asking themselves the question, is this iconic dive watch still worth the money? And rightly so. It is an insane amount of money. Rolex still do a lot of things right, though. The brand's long-standing refusal to chase trends or inflate production numbers is viewed as a form of discipline. Rolex also remains the benchmark for quality and refinement. There are luxury brands that make fewer watches, and there are brands with more intricate movements, but none command the same universal recognition. The Rolex crown continues to symbolize success in a way that transcends geography or culture. And it's this recognition that I think is the only reason they've been able to get away with these price hikes. Is the brand too good that it's boring? Being at the top for so long can also be a universal recognition that also carries a paradox. To some, Rolex's omnipresence has made the brand feel slightly less individual, shall we say? The brand's success has turned it into a kind of obvious choice, a signifier of status rather than personality. Individuality and authenticity are powerful tools, and buyers today may be drawn to brands that offer fresh narratives or underdog appeal. Tudor, Omega, Grand Seiko, micro brands. These are all brands that combine transparency with originality. This shift does not necessarily diminish Rolex's prestige, but it does slightly complicate its position. Rolex, therefore, today is still very much admired, maybe just not idolized. The rise of new and resurgent watch brands has intensified this competition for attention. In 2025, the watch industry is more vibrant and diversified than it has been in decades. Brands like Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe continue to hold their elite positions, but smaller players are drawing significant loyalty from younger enthusiasts. Tudor, Rolex's own sibling brand, has become a particular rival. Once seen as the poor man's Rolex, Tudor has reinvented itself as an authentic vintage-inspired brand, offering amazing watches at a more approachable price. The Black Bay and Pelagos lines in particular appeal to those who appreciate Rolex heritage without the price tag. Similarly, Grand Seiko's artistry and finishing have gained cult-like respect among watch lovers, presenting an alternative definition of luxury. Beyond these traditional competitors, the 2020s have also witnessed a surge in independent and micro-brand creativity. Companies like Baltic, Yema and Christopher Ward, yes, I know they aren't technically a micro-brand anymore, produce mechanical watches that combine honest design with very accessible pricing. In a world increasingly suspicious of overt status signaling, these smaller names embody a kind of quiet luxury. Their rise doesn't dethrone Rolex, but it does divert some of the cultural energy that Rolex once monopolized. For the first time in decades, a consumer might not choose to buy a Rolex, not because they can't afford one, but because they don't want to be seen as the type who does. And this is the really fascinating part for me. I personally own a Rhodium Yachtmaster, and I choose to wear other watches over it much more than I realized. That subtle social shift matters, particularly in younger markets where people don't want to be judged as flashy or rich. Rolex, to its credit, has not ignored these shifts. Its modern releases with pastel tone dials do show a willingness to appeal to new sensibilities. But the brand must now share cultural space it once dominated. Talking about this cultural shift moves nicely onto the next question. Is Rolex still cool? Coolness, of course, is subjective. In the 1980s, Rolex embodied the essence of aspiration. It was the decade of excess. Wearing a Rolex was not merely a sign of taste, it was a declaration of having made it. From the wrists of powerful brokers to the arms of action heroes, Rolex symbolized a kind of masculine swagger. Think Tom Cruise in Top Gun or Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. By contrast, the cultural mood of the 2020s is definitely different. Success is often coded more subtly, and displays of wealth can seem dated. In that sense, the call that Rolex once commanded has mellowed. The brand is no longer rebellious, it is more established and safe. For some, that very stability is the appeal, but for others, especially for younger audiences, coolness now resides in being different. The person wearing an unconventional independent watch or a revived vintage Seiko may project more of the effortless cool once implied. On the flip side of that, nostalgia definitely plays into Rolex's favour. Vintage models from the 1980s are now celebrated precisely because they capture the aesthetic confidence of their time. Collectors today hunt for them not just as investments, but as cultural artifacts. So in this sense, Rolex in 2025 occupies a kind of weird dual identity. It is a brand rooted firmly in the past, yet carried forward by it. It may not be as cool as it was in the 80s, but it has achieved incredible staying power, and you have to respect Rolex for that achievement. So my final thoughts here: is it still viable to buy a Rolex in 2025? The answer depends on what viable means to you. If viability means a short-term financial gain, then the market's correction has made that harder, so probably not. But if viability means a sound long-term purchase, combined with the ownership of an object of genuine quality, then Rolex remains a very strong choice. For an investor, it offers stability and credibility. For the enthusiast, it offers joy, craftsmanship, and brand loyalty. The world, though, has changed drastically in the last 40 to 50 years, and no brand is immune to this. Except maybe Converse. Those will always be cool. What's fascinating to me is seeing a brand try to move with this cultural flow to stay alive. And there's no denying Rolex are very good at that. As for me, I own a Rolex, but just the one. And admittedly, my eyes are a lot of the time drawn to more cheap, fun watches. I don't feel the need to own any more. I'd rather buy a budding micro brand that's trying to find its place in the watch world. So in 2025, are they still worth buying? Yes, Rolex still ticks on. Not because it needs to prove anything, but because it already has.